So I'm just waiting for Marzia to sign on for this live. I'm just waiting for her to join me. Salams, Marzia, I can see you. Just accept my request for the live, or you can click on the, yeah, okay. I should be seeing Marzia in a minute. Assalamualaikum, Insia. Hey, lovely to have you here with me. I'm just gonna try to get yay! Awesome. Assalamualaikum, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. How about you?
I can hear you. Perfect. So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome everyone, and join me in welcoming Marzia. Marzia Hassan has been a family therapist and many other things over the years. I have posted all her, not all her achievements actually, because the list of her achievements that I got on my were mashallah, amazing, and so many. Her social work, her philanthropy work. She's been awarded by the government of Canada also for her work in philanthropy work and volunteering work, and she's got a degree in law, and then she's pursued her passion for helping families build better relationships. So without further ado, Assalamu alaikum, Marzia Pa.
Walaikum salam, sweetheart. Before we begin, I'm not able to, how do I go live? I'm not.
You're already live.
No, what I mean is because on my page, it doesn't show that I'm live. It just shows you. So is there?
It must show that you're live. Just give me a second. I'll check it on my iPad.
Okay. Yeah, I do these so rarely that by the time the second time I do it, I forgot.
Yeah, it's live.
Okay, perfect. Okay, because otherwise I don't want to deal with all the messages later. So, okay. Fatimah, your first few things that you say are getting cut off. I can only hear the end of your sentences.
Even now?
Now I can.
All right. So I think I need to speak a little slowly.
Okay. Yeah, now it's fine.
Okay. So, Marzia, how are you feeling about this conversation that we're having? Do you think that I will start with my first question, which we had discussed that when I posted the poster, it said mental health and spirituality. So I always feel very called to ask my guests to explain to me what they understand by spirituality, and therefore, how do they differentiate between the idea of religion and spirituality?
Okay. Yeah, so a great question to start with, right? That if we're talking about spirituality, what is the difference between religion and spirituality? So, of course, there are some differences, and actually, there is also a big difference in impact on mental health, the way we practice. Okay. So, religion is, spirituality is kind of hardwired into us. So it is, I like to think of it as, when we buy a computer, some things are in the hard drive. So the desire to connect with a higher being is part of our creation, is part of our fitrat, right? It's part of our what we would call primordial nature. Religion comes to give some sort of form to that. So religion will tell you, so the desire, for example, to worship is in everyone. And that's why you see, right, that everyone follows something. We see that. And of course, there's, we won't go into the whole rebellion against that. But generally, the desire to worship is there. Religion tells you who to worship, who not to worship, how to worship, right? So it kind of gives you a direction to your spirituality. Does that make
Wow. No, absolutely. I think that was like a wow thing for me, the way you explained it. It was really amazing. So, spirituality is something innate within us, and everyone experiences it, and religions kind of come to, give us that. It comes to give us a guidance how to. So, if I say, I want to go within and I want to find myself, then how am I going to do that? And religion me that guidelines and say, okay, let's go this way, and perhaps this is going to help you find yourself. And then we have this hadith which says, "Qadarafa nafsahu faqadarafa rabbahu." When you know yourself, you know your Lord, and I think that's brilliant. So thank you for giving us this example of the hard drive in the computer, because it's so important to have relevant contemporary examples.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to just take that a little bit further, without that kind of, I don't know, but do you remember when we were kids and, on Laylatul Qadr, we would put the Quran over our heads, and I guess since I was like really young, I have always had a very spiritual bent and I questioned everything. Okay. So I remember thinking that, it made a real huge impact on me when putting the Quran on our head. Like that told me that guidance is always above my own intelligence.
Guidance.
Is always above my own intelligence. Like I submit to a higher intelligence, right? Because without that kind of guidance, or without, human beings, we are very smart, yes, but we think we're smarter than we are, right? And very often we get lost, we get misled by our own desires, ego, self-interest, short-sightedness. All of these things are true, right? So without uh, you know some eternal values to turn to, we would be really lost. And I've had so many examples of this in my own life, right? That when I tried to follow science, or when I tried to follow, other things without this kind of filter, it always made me lost, right? And when you come back to it, it is like having, a strong basis on which to build your spirituality, right? So we don't have to kind of reinvent the wheel. It is the guidance is there, and at least to me that made a lot of sense. That as long as it also gives you a lot of confidence, right? And yeah.
Amazing. Honestly, I mean, Marzia and I have been meeting, and we travel together and we talk. But this is so amazing. I mean, I've taken courses with you, but as you're speaking, it's like I'm having these like mind blowing moments. Because it's like suddenly things are clicking into place. And when you said we put the Quran on our head, and divine guidance is above the brainy intellect. So, I love this thing which they say that the journey of a mystic is a few inches from the brain to the heart, and it's such a tough journey, even though one might say it's just going from brain to the heart, but it takes faith, it takes reliance, it takes trust, and I guess at some point it becomes about trusting that voice inside you. So a part of you has to trust yourself in that journey because that voice comes from within. And what do you think about this idea in religion where this idea of trust comes in? That are we taught to trust ourselves? Are we required to trust ourselves? What is this trust in the journey?
Okay. So that's obviously a huge question. I can only share my own perspective, right? So we are also told that we have a Habib within us, right? Our guidance system, like our GPS, so to speak. Okay. And, you know, the external guidance, according to my understanding, is always meant to align with that internal guidance. Okay. So and that's why Islam is called Deen Fitrat, right? Because when we hear something, it sort of makes sense that yes, it should be this way. Okay. Like for example, praying 5 times a day. You know, we if we are in touch with ourselves, we know that we are so easily distracted, that we are forgetful, that we have the best of intentions, but we sort of lose track. And when we see the structure of the prayer, how it is structured, it is literally, I always like to think, that Quran has always told us to aqimus salah. It doesn't say salli, it doesn't say pray, it always says aqimus salah. In other words, we are invited to make it a structure of our existence. And when we do that, it aligns with our internal self, which is that we're forgetful, we're not mindful, we lose track, and we need to keep coming back, right? So, so in terms of trusting your inner voice, so I'll give you so many examples, right? That, again, like I said, I used to question everything as a child, my poor parents, and a lot of times what I heard in terms of culture and in terms of the way religion was practiced did not align with my internal voice. Did not, okay? And, many people are having the same experience, right? Young people today. And it is unfortunate, when you have that kind of, dissonance inside, or you have that kind of pull, you can go two ways, right? Either it can take you to let me find out the truth, or, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. If people are not practicing religion properly, it must be the problem from the religion, right? And you see a lot of people turning away because that connection between their internal voice and religion has not been made.
It's just not clicking, it's hitting.
Yeah. So, and as parents and as people, mentors, or guiding young people, why do people, like so many times when I speak to young people, their biggest kind of distress is that their questions were never answered, right? They were always told, this is how it is, just believe, just believe. And blind faith is actually, to my understanding, not part of Islam. Islam invites you to question, right? It invites you to, and one of my teachers used to say that beware of the clarity that comes before confusion. Beware the clarity that comes before confusion. What does that mean? That if we haven't wrestled with it, if we haven't actually questioned anything, right, then our faith is kind of quite, it can be very easily displaced or shattered. And again, the problem is that we question at the wrong level because we haven't questioned at the right level. What do I mean by that? So we have the roots of religion, right, usul-e-din, and then we have the furuedin, fruits of religion, right? Very often we find people questioning the furu. You know, why pray? Why fast? Why fast like this? Why, why is this? Why is that? And the reason is because we haven't really questioned the roots, which we are supposed to question. We are not, there's no taqleed, there is no following anyone in adalat. There is no following anyone in the belief in accountability, right? Those things you are really supposed to question. You have to satisfy yourself that this is okay. Once the roots are there, you will not question the fruits, because if your mind is sorted that yes, my intelligence is limited, that I need to submit, that this is a power that I should probably submit to, like he meets all the qualifications, right? His resume is pretty good, right? So he is, and like Ayatul Kursi, right? I literally think that's God's resume. So, look at his resume and decide for yourself. Is this someone worth aligning yourself to, right? And if so, then when you have given him the role of leadership, when you are submitting, then probably, don't spend your energy and time questioning how and why, and, because again, we are limited, right?
Yes, absolutely. Oh my God, I had so many aha moments while you were speaking. And I love this resume of God is pretty good. I mean, I've never had these words said to me, and it just clicks so much because the way trust comes is when you see somebody's accolades and their history, right? How have they been performing? And if you look at God, it's never ever has it been that the day did come after night. So yeah, he's doing pretty well for me to try. And in that way, you're so right that but Marzia, but don't you think, like you said initially, that people are put off from religion because we don't have the people who are representing religions, and I usually say people have the reins of religion in their hands. They are misinterpreting, or they're so unapproachable, or they're so daunting, perhaps, or judgy. Judgy is this thing, right? Thing, like you're being judged, that you feel constipated. You can't go up and just be free in asking questions, right? So I think that you're so right here that if we could ask these questions, then the real religion could be seen for what it is instead of what it has been made into. So when it comes to the aqaid or the real roots of religion, don't you think that the culture has been? I mean, I'm really grateful for people like you who have come and opened the floor for people to really openly question. But majority of the time, when somebody comes up and asks a question about God, for example, there's this sense of offense taken, like, okay, don't question God.
Yeah, I just like to backtrack a little bit, if I may. So in terms of, so when I'm talking about the way religion has been practiced, please, let it be very clearly known, I am not talking about um, the people who have the reins of religion. Absolutely not. Because one of the principles in my life is I only talk about my own circle of control, right? So when I'm talking about how we have not been allowed to question, I'm talking about myself as a parent. I'm talking about what I can do in my family. Because when we give away the power to other people, right, it's a really disempowering kind of place to be. And the way I look at it, we could spend our lives saying that, yes, people didn't, present religion to us properly. This wasn't, but what is lacking? What do we have missing in our lives that we cannot do the work for ourselves? And Islam is very egalitarian in that way, in the sense that everyone has access. I mean, today, lack of access is not a problem. We all have. So I remember speaking to a group of youth once, and there was, I'll it's very clear. It was in another community, and I was there for the whole weekend. And one of the sessions was with youth, and there were like maybe 50 or 60 youth in one room. And there was this one table, and from their body language, I could see that, they were really frustrated. They had a lot of questions. They had a lot of, and being who I am, a skeptic at heart, I really get it. I'm not here to convince anyone, or let's just have a conversation and see where it goes, right? So, they started questioning all sorts of things. And then I said, you're absolutely right. But, what is your understanding from what you've read, from what the text says? To me, the text is the Quran. Okay, let's start there. And, none of them had actually ever read the Quran. And they were really arguing against it. So I said, see, here's the thing. I really respect that you have questions. But if you were in an academic setting, right, if you showed up in your university class and you were arguing without having done the homework, who would take you seriously? So you actually owe it to yourself to actually convince me that you know what you're talking about. Let's be serious. I respect you as an individual, but not if you don't know what you're talking about. So why don't you read it first, and then we will have a conversation, right?
Absolutely.
I was so, I didn't sleep that night because I was so stressed because, all of these parents, obviously, they had kind of forced these young people to come. And I was like, oh my God, they're going to, I'm going to be excommunicated and all of that, right? So although I do speak my mind, I really want to work with courage, but that doesn't mean that I'm not scared, right? So, and I remember reading the feedback forms that night, and I was like, and the one thing that all of them took away from that was that, okay, yeah, let's read the Quran. So I was like, Alhamdulillah, right?
I mean, I think that being authentic and speaking your truth, I think eventually pays off. So kudos to you for, putting yourself out there with your truth and doing what you felt was the right way of approaching the youth. And I'm sure it was very impactful, because it's not generally how we see such settings. We're just spoon fed, and it generally doesn't stir sense of it doesn't stimulate especially the youth to do something, right? But
because also parents are coming from fear, right? They're coming from a place of not knowing themselves. And the way I look at it, Allah has guaranteed that He is going to protect His book, right? And He is in charge of protecting the religion. So I don't have to, that's not my job. So if somebody is, is questioning religion, I don't have to defend it. I can only share what my understanding is, and of course, pray for the other and for myself. So, before doing anything, obviously, my prayer and my deepest intention, one of the du'as, right, that make me speak with guidance, like that is it's something that I pray every single day, because it's a huge responsibility, and my responsibility ends at doing the work, first of all, right? And speaking the truth and being open. And the other person's responsibility is to take it, right, and to move forward with it, to accept it, not accept it. So, as you do the work on yourself, you really become more clearer about what your role is, which is a huge one, right? It's not underestimating it, but there is a boundary as well, that you do your best. And then really, it's, I always like to think of it, my business, their business, God's business, right? To guide people, not my business, right? That is God's business. I mean, if the prophets couldn't do it, like they had a very limited impact in their lifetime, right? I always think of Nabi Nuh alayhi salam, 950 years, right? So So it's not, I'm very, very wary of putting the blame or holding people who hold the reins of religion accountable, because my job is my own accountability, right?
And I think that this blame game ends up disempowering us to a place of paralysis. Like it paralyzes us because we just stop the journey. There's a leakage of our energy into this, blame game, and then there's no energy going to do the inner work. And I really appreciate you bringing this in. But then I feel like a lot of the youth seem disgruntled and upset. So where is this reluctance to pick up the Quran coming from? Do you think that the fear developed or a fear was instilled over the years to say that, well, Quran is a prestigious book and it's not for everybody to pick up, but it's just for the elite scholars to pick up this book and bring what they need to bring to you? Do you see do you think that that has got something to do with the reluctance for the layman to pick up the Quran?
Mm, I think there's no easy answer to anything. There are many factors. And, you know, again, we could look at the external circumstances, or we could look at the fact that actually, at any moment, in any time, I can make that choice. Anyone can make that choice. And our role as, well, now, like, definitely as an elder of the community, right? Uh, it is to encourage and to invite. And you cannot force anyone. Religion, spirituality is not something that can be taught, right? It can only be inspired by your own actions and within your own, circle of control. So, yes, has there been spiritual baggage and religious baggage? Absolutely, that is true. And is it true that people have more access today than they've ever had in their lives? Also very true. And is it also true that it is so much easier to blame than to take responsibility? Because if we take responsibility, then we actually have to do something about it. That is also true, right? So, what? So who knows why, right? The what can we, what choices can we make in the moment to start, to pick up the book and to at least, because so many times I've worked with youth, and it's very disheartening when you see youngsters, like, who have been reading the text for decades, right? Who have been reciting duas even. And so when I'm speaking to young people, I'm like, you know what, yes, I can understand. Okay, uh, Allah's talking to you in the Quran, you don't understand, right? You're just accepting, okay, this is true. When you are making supplication, you're actually talking to God. So if you don't even understand that, you don't even know what you're asking for. Like, how would you know when you get it? What is like, is it, does it have benefits? Absolutely. I'm not denying that. But again, the purpose of it is to connect, right? Is to gain something from it. And if you don't understand what you're doing, it's kind of lost effort.
And I sometimes give this example that if a doctor writes you a prescription on a piece of paper and you just take that prescription and keep reading it, Panadol, 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 water, maybe that will have some effect like a placebo effect or something. But imagine the effect it will have to actually go and get the medicine and then have it and internalize it. So the difference is massive. So compared to 1 or 2% healing, there's like a 90% healing that you're kind of losing out on if you go and understand what you're reading. So
Yeah.
absolutely.
But
And
here's the thing about our amazing Rab, though, right? This is who we're dealing with. That even if you just read Tylenol, right? He has kept blessings in the words, in the recitation, in looking at the words, right? There's actually, like, and I'm sure you know this better than me, that every level of engagement with the word is beneficial to our healing, right? To our being on so many levels, right? I mean, I remember coming across this, I forget his name now, but his entire thesis was how the words of the Quran are constructed for healing on the sight. And we've all heard the sound, the sound healing, of course, by now we all know, right? So is there blessings in looking at the words, in recitation, in absolutely. This is not to deny that, right? This is to hopefully take it to the other level.
I mean, I'm really big on the sound of the word and how it heals, because sound is a wave. We are all energy-based entities. We have electromagnetic waves, and the interaction of a sound wave with the electromagnetic wave of the heart is, for me, in my modality of healing, the biggest form of healing. So I'm totally, at par with you over there. But you know what I mean, that, there is purpose there to understand the word of God and then bring it into action. So while I would, do work in healing with the names of God, and say, well, Allah is a Rahman and let's do its wird and zikr, but then to emulate that name as well and to understand what it means and what does God's mercy looks like. So then taking it to that higher level. So thank you for out. Now, coming back to what we were discussing earlier about spirituality and religion, and we were discussing how Islam is called Deen Fitrat. So, could you give us an insight into what does it mean by the word when we say Fitrat?
Okay. Of course, I mean, this could turn into a big academic discussion, right? But I'll just say it in very how I understand it is, again, my internal world, right? The way I think, the way I function, the way I my emotions, my mental emotional energy, all of that follows principles, right? So, we may think we're very unique, right? But all humans work on certain principles. And obviously, the creator, the one who wrote the program, right, knows what that is. So again, going back to that, and I'm actually thinking aloud at this point. So the fitrat is kind of how you function, how you are made. So human beings desire pleasure and we run away from pain, right? That is our fitrat. That is human nature, you could say, right? Fitrat nature. And so when we are, but however, we have obviously different levels of nature, right? So we have our very base kind of what is called our tabai nature, right? Our instinctual nature, what in modern psychology would be called our ancient brain, which is what focused on survival. That the instinct, the basic instinct of a human being is for survival. And actually, if we understand that, we would really understand why it is so easy to be negative rather than to be quote unquote positive, right? Because our brain is programmed for survival. It's not programmed to make us happy. Okay. However, so what it does, it helps us, our base nature helps us survive so that we can do other things. Again, coming back like to the hierarchy of needs, if we were dead, we really can't progress, right? So prime directive of human brain, keep you alive. Okay. Now, sometimes it does that by being what we call an overly helpful friend. So it makes us fear things that are actually not really that scary in this day and age. Okay. But so, so the human being needs to reach higher than just your base self. Now, again, in the brain, there are higher levels of consciousness as well. But in order to access that, we kind of have to, accept our basic nature and then also get in touch with a higher nature. I don't know if this is making sense, right? So, and the Quran has many examples of this, right? That we have been created, to be the highest, and we can also be asfala safili, right? And this is it. So when we fall to our basic survival instinct, what will we do? We'll fight with others, we will fly, danger, we will freeze, we will appease, people pleasing. All of that is related to your survival nature, right? Is that your fitrat? It's part of your nature. However, you have this desire, and this is part of the human brain. It is part of our creation to want to transcend all of this, right? To connect with something bigger than yourself. That is also part. That is your actual fitrat, right? So in a sense, the tabai nature keeps you alive so that you can progress towards your fitrat. Is this making sense?
I was actually trying to make it into my own words, and I felt like what you're saying is that somehow this fitrat is programmed from a state of fear into a, and that's the journey.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. So I'm missing the first part of what you're saying.
So I said that what to me is simply put, journey from a state of fear to a state of faith.
Absolutely. Very well put.
Fear would mean transcending all of my insecurities, all of my people pleasing, all of my fears, which you just mentioned, that anxiety, panic, all of that. And I'm really, really excited about you explaining this, because I've always believed that the purpose of religion was to free us and liberate us from fear. And that's why I love to talk about religion in tandem with spirituality and with psychology, because psychological dysfunctions or psychological states that need attention happen from all kinds of different fears. Fear of failure, fear of reputation, losing your reputation, fear of all kinds of these things. And Tawheed, going towards God and reliance and trust in that one Almighty Wise One, liberates us from the fear of all of that. Um, but the reason I get excited and I love to talk about it is because I grew up with a definition or a version of religion that instilled a lot of fear in me, and it was kind of the opposite, right?
Yeah. So this is again, where religion and spirituality have slightly different impacts on mental health, for example. Okay. So religion without spirituality, which is of course possible, right? So if you just focus on the form and not the spirit of religion, there are some watch points that will impact your spiritual health, your mental health. The first thing is judgment and criticism. So, I'm sure many of the people you work with, certainly the vast majority of the people I work with, struggle with judgment and criticism of self. And it comes from this idea that in order to be acceptable, we have to be perfect. Because this is what we take away from religion, right? That you have to be, like mothers, for example, women are held to such a high standard that it's impossible, right? And B, that we're always falling short, and so, whenever I'm speaking to, like, even I like to make a distinguish between, so the pursuit of perfection is a big theme, right? Especially in women, when women are speaking, what we hear from the member, the pursuit of perfection, be perfect. And it's, I like to think of it in a slightly different way, because perfect is the outcome. Perfect is a standard. It is something that perfect is, and the outcome of anything, right? So if you are baking, for example, and you have a perfect cake. The perfect is not what you're doing. The perfect is the end result of what you have done. Okay. uh, the outcome of anything is actually never up to us. The outcome is always by definition outside our circle of control, because that's up to God, right? What is up to us is the journey, the process by which we are living moment to moment, day to day. Okay. So if we just reword it just a little bit, right? And instead of perfection, we pursue excellence. We pursue ihsan. Ihsan is something which we can do in the moment. We can make a choice in the moment, which is a beautiful choice, which is an excellent choice given everything, right? That is definitely within our circle of control. And this is the journey by which we live day to day, moment to moment, right? When we get so focused on perfection, what we see is all the ways we're falling short, right? All the ways that we are not meeting the standard. But what we're not seeing is the effort we're putting in, the moments that we did actually, manage to make a good choice in the moment. And in terms of our mental health, perfection is a really destructive idea. This is how religion can be used to harm.
Thank you. It's reminding me of a saying I heard in Ertugrul. He says that the journey is ours and the victory is God's. You
Uh,
know, it frees you from the outcome. It frees you from where you'll reach, but it gives you a sense of responsibility of what you're meant to do right now, and that needs to be your best, not somebody else's best. Um, Remember how far we have come with the efforts we put in instead of constantly focusing on how far we have to go. Because nobody really knows how to go, right? We don't even when our time might come and might be leaving this world or whatever, right? How long do we have? So to make sure that our accountability lies in the moment and we can go to sleep with peace at night saying, I did my you know so you're so right that the idea of perfection even within religion can be very harmful because then we're constantly falling short. And Madhyapa, I feel like what I saw in spirituality, in even in modern day spirituality, which I very much feel has always been part of the truth in Islam, the real Islam, is that there's this having intimate connection with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and we see that in the and Labdeen in the whispered prayers, you know, to be unabashed and to just be open. And I usually when I talk, I say, think of God as the best therapist you ever found. You can just be open and you can just say anything you want to say without being judged. Because if we don't have that, and if we're constantly scared of falling short, then we don't find ourselves worthy of God, and that can become the biggest hurdle in reaching out to God, because the idea is that you need to be perfect for God instead of saying I'm not perfect and through God I can.
yeah. Okay. So, yeah, absolutely. So many things, so much to unpack, right, in what you said. In terms of confessing to God, the most amazing thing is that He already knows. He already knows. So even when we go to a therapist, obviously there is that fear of, of sharing, of judgment. But here's the thing, you're speaking to somebody who already knows. And when you confess of your shortcomings, it is very freeing to actually put it out there rather than have it be in your head, number one. Number two, in terms of, perfect for God, that's the highest level of arrogance, because that is really being arrogant to think that we will ever be worthy of God, right? So and again, it is what we are focusing on. And by the way, this is a really important part in mental health as well, that what leads us to anxiety, depression, all of that is a really focus on yourself, right? So when even in public speaking, for example, if we ever, and I'm sure you know this, right, that when we first start talking to a platform, you're so focused on yourself, right? Am I looking okay? Am I sounding okay? Do I know enough? All of that. And that leads to nothing but anxiety and misery, right? When you are, when you come to terms with the fact that you're not perfect, you're not going to look great, and you will not know everything, and you will make mistakes, right? And instead, focusing on the message that you have to deliver to an audience, it's really freeing, right? And this is exactly the kind of mindset that if we approach God with, that we're okay with the fact that, listen, there's no way, how are we ever going to be perfect? Like, have you read the du'as of the Imams? They didn't focus on themselves. They focused on how awesome God was, and in comparison, how weak the human being is. So if you already come to terms with, yeah, that's not going to happen, right? I am where I am, and let me connect to someone who is the source of all blessings. And so again, when our focus is him rather than ourselves, it's freeing, it's good for our mental health. It's also something doable. But when we're continuously focused on how short we're falling, like, good luck. Where are we going to go with that?
What I meant with the being worthy of God is where what I want your your guidance here as well. Maybe I'm wrong. Is that to feel that God, I need some sort of credentials to be able to talk to God. I need to find something worthy so that I can be able to talk to Him. And the reason I'm saying this is because a lot of people will come and say, "Oh, I have alcohol, or I do drugs, or I do weed, or I don't do this, or I don't do that." So why would God listen to me? Because I'm such a sinner. My duas will not get cool because I'm such a sinner. So there's this self shaming, which where we say, but now because I'm not worthy of, in that sense is what I meant.
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah. Yeah.
um, do we even need to be worthy in any way to be able to approach God? That God doesn't require us to be anything because He will always be there for anybody.
Yes. So, qualification to ask God, are you breathing? Right? Are you alive? That's it. You know, Literally, that's the only qualification, right? You are worthy because He chose to put you on this planet, right? You are worthy because He is your creator. And that is the only qualification you need to present yourself in His court, like literally. So, if it was, and there's a beautiful dua that we recite in Ramzan for Sehri, right? Which says that, I'm at the shores of your mercy. And, if it was only people who succeeded were the ones who fasted, who prayed, then what about us? What about us who are so desperately clinging to some hope? And that's why, Allah says again and again that the loss of hope is not only bad for your mental health, but it's actually considered like a sin in Islam. Why? Because again, don't think of your shortcoming. Think of whose court you're in. Is he not Rahman to the most oppressive being on the planet? The sun shines for everyone. The rain falls for everyone. Everyone can enjoy this glorious sky and the flowers in spring. So he is already giving you so much. So would he not listen to you? It's again, it's not us. It's understanding who he is. You know,
We heard this in the du'as. Oh Allah, don't look at me and don't look at who I am, but I come to you because I have hope in who you are. And that's
actually,
hard.
yeah, like Imam says, right? Don't leave me to my own devices even for a second, even for a second.
So I don't know where the time went. It's been amazing experience talking to you. It's just been gone by like a breeze, and we just have these final few minutes. So you were so right. We'll just touch the fourth question now that I my list, which is, do religious practices support mental health? Do spiritual practices help us? Evidence practicing spirituality and its benefits on mental health. If we can
Okay.
quickly.
So yes, we could do a whole session just on this, but I will really touch on I came across some amazing research recently. I can't even remember the person's first name. The second name is Miller. And you know what she said? She spent a long time doing this work on spirituality and mental health. And she says that like I'm a neuroscience nerd, okay? So the part of the brain that registers depression is the same part of the brain that registers spirituality. So, one of the things she said was that in it is almost like the depressed brain is craving spiritual connection.
Oh,
The depressed brain is craving spiritual connection. And, again, going back to the words of the Quran, Allah bi zikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. So, you know, for me, like my work focuses on how science validates what we believe, right? Because for me, that's a bridge to connecting with the skeptics, with the youth. For myself, again, firstly, right? Because like I said, I'm a big skeptic. So, how does spirituality help? And like I said, religion can be baggage as well, because again, if you are focused on the judgment, judgment also stops people from getting help. So, if they're being abused, if they are going through grief, the judgment will often stop people. So, and this is why we need to connect to spirituality, and so connecting to something bigger. Human beings, again, hardwired, it's in our fitrat to want connection. Human beings do not, even Nabi Adam alayhi salam did not survive on his own, right? So even he wanted connection, even though he was in Jannah, right? So the desire for connection is hardwired into human beings. So spirituality and religion at its best give you not only connection to the divine, connection to a community of faith, right? Connection of practice. When you practice together, and again, so much research on this that when people meditate together and pray, like of course research has been done in that area, but we could extrapolate it to praying, their brains get synchronized, right? So when you see, even put them in different rooms and look at their brain waves, they seem to be in sync because they prayed together. So connection, one of the things that I've never seen talked about, I haven't read anyway, but to me it makes a lot of sense that spirituality is completely a way to overcome marginalization, exclusion. Why? Because again, एक ही सफ में खड़े हो गए महमूद अयाज, ना कोई बंदा रहा ना कोई बंदा नवाज. That in his court you are only judged, nothing external matters, right? So if you've been the most oppressed person, you have the same access to this Rab that your king or leader or oppressor has. And that is so comforting, that this is one court, this is one way where I'm not excluded, that I have as much right and access to as anyone else. Of course, mindfulness, conscious living, focus, right? The lack of force, like distraction. I would love to talk about distraction, in the modern world these days. Modern world designed to keep us distracted, right? And it's not leading to mental well-being. mindfulness, focus, religion, spirituality, it really gives us a perspective, a larger perspective than this world, and it encourages us, invites us to live consciously in every moment, which again is the access to mental well-being. Compassion, forgiveness, gratitude. The three major components of spirituality. Again, hundreds of hours of research, thousands, millions, on how these are kind of the keys to mental well-being, compassion, self-compassion, forgiveness, gratitude. And this is the essence of spirituality as well, right? So absolutely, there's a huge connection.
Beautiful. So when you were talking about people praying together, it reminded me of how when the azan goes, we're asked to do it on awale waqt, like do it together at one time, so that there's a whole group of people, even if they're praying at home, enter a state of sync with each other, And when we do, like we had a comment, somebody had commented and very well said that when we do the congregational prayers for Jummah or for Eid, we are creating a certain vibe, an energetic ripple effect. And I remember reading a research where I can't remember the name of the doctor right now, but he said that people who meditate together are more effective than Panadol. Like, how effective is Panadol? It's more than that, right? And to sum up all what you said, I read this post somewhere and it just stuck in my mind, and I go back to it so often. It says, "Happiness is a spiritual state," and pursuit of happiness, in reality, we're actually in pursuit of that spirituality. And that's where I would like to conclude our session. I am so, so grateful.
Thank you.
Grateful to Allah for putting you in our lives. I'm so grateful for this 1 hour, so beautifully spent with you. I learned so much. There were so many moments where I felt like they were aha moments. I mean, I felt a shift, and I'm very sure that so many of the people who heard you must have felt that. So thank you, God, for putting Marzia in our lives.
Thank
And
you. Thank you.
so much. I really, really hope that out of your busy schedule, we will have you again sometime in future.
Inshallah. Inshallah. Would love to.
Everybody have a lovely day. Until next time. Khuda Hafiz.